Good morning. I'm Dr. Petra Weldis, and we're grateful that we have folks in the room and you online for our Sunday morning Science of Mind class. So, we're on page 339 of the Science of Mind, What the Mystics Have Taught, in the section of evolution. And what an interesting thing to have the topic of evolution in the topic of mysticism, which I think is always pretty interesting. So I know that Tracy was with you last week and talked about the idea of the individual. And today we're talking about evolution as a principle. Evolution is a principle which, through invisible, finds manifestation in every form of life. It is the logical or necessary outcome of the universal intelligence of spirit. But evolution is an effect of intelligence, not its cause. So it's really interesting to think about, right? Because there's that constant conversation about creation and the theory of evolution and creationism. And if you study all the different ways that people talk about how did the physical universe get to be here, they have determined that there are essentially 12, 12 theories, 12 ways of looking at it. Actually, now I'm going to need my little board. So let me get my little board. I love being back here because now we can, this is going to be loud, sorry. Use a little whiteboard, which I think is really cool. And hopefully you guys online will be able to see it. Okay, so in evolutionary theory, there's this discussion that there are 12 ways. Well, I don't know if I can do all 12, but let's pretend that we have actually 12 lines here. It looks like we don't have quite enough. But on this side, we have creationism in its most radical form. God created the heavens and the earth. God created the bones of the dinosaurs in the earth. God created the fossils. It was all 6,000, some 100 years ago, according to all the big gets in the Bible. And it was all done in one fell swoop and on purpose. Over here, we have sort of a radical mechanistic point of view. And this radical mechanistic point of view is pure random. It's purely random. Everything is purely random. Things happen accidentally because after the Big Bang, things started to, particles started to simply run into each other. And in the running into each other, they happened to coalesce, they happened to come together. And over eons of time, accidentally, randomly, things just simply began to create larger and larger and larger groupings, which ultimately became the earth and plants and animals and, of course, everything in the universe, all the galaxies and everything else. Right, so normally it's presented that these two things are the only ways to think about it, and that they are in opposition to each other. Right, they're in complete opposition to each other. In the middle section here, there is actually some ways of looking at it, and you've probably heard it before, and it's called intelligent design. Intelligent design comes out of the notion that has become more and more and more apparent and more accepted in many spiritual and scientific circles, in that the ultimate building block of the universe isn't anything physical. It's energy, and that energy is actually packets of intelligence, packets of information. And quantum physicists, along with the astrophysicists, whether you look in the little tiniest particles or the largest particles, what many of them have said, if they are not over here in this sort of very, very mechanistic point of view, what they've said is if you look out into the world, into either the microcosm or the ultimate macrocosm, what you see is consciousness looking back. Because what you see is an intelligent design. In chaos theory, it's called the implicit order, the order that underlies what appears to be chaotic, what appears to be random. There's actually an underlying order that can be seen and studied, and it's that order that reveals itself as laws, the natural laws, and by implication, the spiritual laws. So New Thought, Science of Mind, and Metaphysics falls squarely into this idea of intelligent design. That there is an intelligence, a consciousness, that is actually that out of which everything is made. And that intelligence is constantly seeking to express itself more and more and more fully. Evolution is a principle which, through invisible, finds manifestation in every form of life. It is the logical or necessary outcome of the universal intelligence of spirit. But evolution is an effective intelligence and not its cause. And so one of the ways that we can think about this, and the mystics have said this for tens of hundreds of years, for thousands of years, the mystics have said, and it's the Zen koan, right? If a tree falls in the forest, is there a sound? Can anybody hear it? Is there a sound? Right? And so the mystics understood, and we are coming to understand that we don't have ears so that we can hear. There is sound in the universe, and the ears are the organs that have manifested themselves so that that sound can be heard. Do you see the difference? It's not that the ears came first and then came sound. It's that there are waves of sound, and an organ was needed to register those. And so ears began to develop from whatever the ears are that the initial original animals had as they crawled out of the ocean and began to register, right? And so the idea of evolution is ultimately this intelligence, this conscious intelligence has been developing to the point where there's an organ that can reveal consciousness itself. Just as our eyes reveal the idea that there is something to see, and our ears reveal the idea that there is something to hear. That which was to be heard and that which was to be seen actually was there, and an organ needed to grow to see that or to hear it. And an organ needed to be developed for consciousness to reveal itself. So along with the Hindus, the idea is that all of evolution is in service to intelligence and consciousness, continually seeking to reveal itself more and more and more. And so we have this idea, we go on, evolution can only follow involution. Involution is the idea, while evolution is the unfoldment of the idea. Involution precedes evolution, and evolution follows with mechanical precision, propelled by an immutable law, the law of cause and effect. So this idea of involution is the idea that there is a need, there is a desire, there is an impulse of life, there is a directionality of this intelligence seeking expression. And it is that impulse, that involution, that involves into the physical, which then begins to evolve into something that can manifest that initial, we use the word idea, impulse, quite frankly, a need or desire for life to express itself, for intelligence to express itself. And so evolution is the outpicturing of this intelligence. And it's really kind of extraordinary that in almost every scientific endeavor, whether it's quantum physics or astrophysics or biology, where there's such an extraordinary developing understanding of the inherent intelligence in everything. right? And we understand more and more and more in medicine, the inherent intelligence in the cells and in the organs and in the body, right? Which is just an outpicturing of the inherent intelligence in all of creation. And so evolution is this outward expression of this intelligent design. And the whole process is an organic development of the expression of life itself. And we could talk a little bit about Ken Wilber's notion that the more complex the shall we say the grouping of atoms and molecules and cells, the more complex it becomes, the more intelligence is revealed. And we see that if you go from single-celled plants and animals through plants to animals to human beings to who knows what anywhere else in the universe, right, where there's more and more and more intelligence, more and more engagement and ability to understand the natural world, the more complex the organism that has evolved. So this idea of evolution is it's fundamental to our understanding of the whole point of creation, right? The whole point of creation is the expression of life, is the expression of spirit. And this, for me, has always been one of the things that I've absolutely loved about the science of mind and metaphysics. So many spiritual traditions are seeking to transcend the world, get away from the world. Wait until you die and then you go to heaven. This is a bad, sinful, horrible place. Or if nothing else, if you subscribe to reincarnation or karma or whatever, this place is nothing but a place to learn lessons and to pay for false ideas, right, until you have finally overcome all of that, and then you're released from the world. In science of mind, there's no interest in being released from physicality. Let me rephrase that. There's no interest in being released from expression, because expression is the other side of being. There's the being and then there's becoming. Being is not expressed, right? And expression is required. And so whether it's on this plane, in this life, in this world, or on some other plane, in some other life, in some other world, expression is always the other side of the infinite being. And so it's required. So all of this, none of this is bad and wrong. None of this needs to be overcome. This is actually the place where we are now, to the point where we're engaged in creation. We're engaged in the process of creating things. We're engaged in the recognition that we're a part of all of this and that it's actually beautiful. And not only is it beautiful, but it needs us to now begin to take care of it again. Instead of always thinking that we could take what we wanted because it didn't matter, because it was dead or inert or unnecessary or quite frankly wrong. And all of that is being revealed as not true. That life itself is inherent in physical creation, and that it has its own value and its own life regardless of our use of it. And we're a part of all of that. So creation becomes something valuable and enjoyable and beautiful, and not something that we're trying to get away from. Right? And so in the science of mind, in New Thought, it's not like we're trying to get to heaven. We are trying to actually bring heaven to earth. We're trying to live in that state of oneness in physical creation, because we recognize that this is where life is expressing itself. And I just love that idea that we're not trying to overcome, and that it's not always a lesson. And it's not always something that we need to fix or get away from. But there's a reason why our children are beautiful, and sunsets make us smile, and good food and good friendship and beautiful art matters to us. because there's something being expressed. And we're actually the place where the universe is getting to be aware of the beauty. We're actually the place where beauty is being seen and recognized, as opposed to simply being beauty. Do you see? Without eyes to see, beauty is not recognizable. Something can be beautiful, but if there are no eyes to see the beauty, it simply is beauty. But we have the opportunity to look at it and to experience it and to name it and to recognize it as that, right? And that's true for all the qualities of God, and it's true for life itself. And so that involution of beauty then becomes expressed so that an organ has grown and evolved to the place where beauty is now recognizable, or love, or peace, or harmony, or abundance. These things are now recognizable, and we can work with them and work towards more of that, as opposed to it simply being. So the whole point of evolution is this intelligence moving. God is universal intelligence or spirit. The only way intelligence can move is by an interior movement. God must move within God if God is all. And so that's the impulse. That's the push of life itself. Ernest Holmes is still using the word God here. I might not use that word if it has a lot of baggage. We're not talking about a God up in the sky somewhere, right? We're not talking about a deity, but an impulse of the very essence of the infinite life itself, moving and seeking to express in all the myriad of ways that expression is possible, right? And if it's an infinite reality, then there are an infinite number of ways that it can be expressed. And so evolution is constantly creating new things. Some of them last hundreds of millions of years, and some of them don't, as these expressions are constantly being brought to the forefront. So the starting point of creation is this inner movement, this impulse, this desire. And we tend to call it an idea or thought, which seems very, what shall we say? It seems very cerebral on the one hand, right? And it seems very clinical on the other, right? It's, I have a thought. But it's really a movement. It's a movement in consciousness. And I think it's much more powerful to recognize that it's an impulse. It's actually a desire for expression, which may have some shape and definition to it, right? An idea that we conceive or a thought that we have. I'd like to have this. I'd like to do that. I'd like to express these things, right? We give it some shape and definition, but there's a push. There's an impulse. And as that's happening macrocosmically, we understand that that's what we do as well, because we're waking up to what is going on. And we're waking up to our ability to engage with what's going on. All right, the last thing I want to say is, I know that there's this whole thing about evolution isn't in the Bible, which is completely nonsense. Evolution is most certainly in the Bible. It's in the first story of Genesis, so don't ever let anybody tell you that evolution isn't in the Bible. If you go to the first story in Genesis and you go through the whole God created the heavens and the earth and then the plants and the animals and the earth and the sky and all of that, if you go through that whole series over those days and you explore it carefully in terms of evolution, what you see is that it is exactly in the same order as we understand evolution to have happened. The only thing that's out of place are the moon and the stars and the sun, when the moon and the stars and the sun are created. It's the only thing that's out of place. Everything else is exactly as we understand evolution to take place, right? There was nothing. Then there was the heavens and the earth as the Big Bang started to really coalesce into solar systems, galaxies, solar systems, right? And the earth started to form, and then the earth was void. There was nothing there. And we know that as it was forming with all the volcanoes, there was no life, whatever. And out of all of that, what happened? Rain rain happened. And so then the water and the seas were divided because, of course, that's exactly what happened. Water, it started to rain, and then so there was earth and water. And out of that, the grasses started to grow and the seas started to fill. Exactly as it's stated in the Bible. And out of that, then the plants grew and the fish, and out of the fish came the animals and the birds, and out of the animals and the birds came human beings. It's exactly and precisely in the same order. It's really extraordinary. Although it's not extraordinary when we think about how deeply connected mystics are. This is why this is in the chapter on mysticism. There's something within us when we truly experience our oneness, when we are open to that mystical impression of life itself and the infinite knowingness, there is that within us which actually does reveal and experience truth, right? And so here's this extraordinary ancient shamans who had these amazing experiences and were able to actually describe evolution as we understand it today. Not perfectly, but they didn't have the science we have today, right? But extraordinarily in alignment. It's really quite something. And so we have a mystical understanding of evolution that jives with our scientific understanding of evolution, which jives with our spiritual understanding of evolution. That the whole push is toward greater and greater and greater expression, and an expression that becomes so organized and complex that it can actually see itself. It can actually see consciousness and see what's going on. All right, so this is a lot of science for 9 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday morning. It's a lot of science. It's some of my favorite stuff here for us to talk about. But let's stop there. And see what is swirling around. We'll stop and we'll see what comments and questions we have here in the room, and what comments and questions we have online. So I saw Ryan had something to say. So let's welcome Ryan as well, and let's see what's going on out there, Ryan.
Welcome everybody, and thank you so much for introducing me, Dr. Petra. And it's great to have everybody here in the room with us, right? Can I get a whoop whoop for that?
Whoop whoop.
Yeah. All right. So this is an interesting space that we're moving into because of the whole hybrid experience. So there's lots of different ways to engage. So I just want to give some house cleaning rules, I guess I'll call them that. So we want engagement. This is an interactive discussion. I do have folks that are online, and obviously those that are here with us today. And the way that we want folks to join with us on the Zoom room is by raising your hand, or you can always type your questions, which it looks like there's a couple things in here. And those who are watching us on Facebook Live, I'm watching and monitoring the comments there so I can bring those into the room as well. And for anybody here in our audience today, just go ahead and raise your hand, throw it in the air like you just don't care, right? And we'll go ahead and I'll unmute the microphone so those folks that are online can hear. It may or may not be the best, but I just encourage everybody to speak up so we in the room and online can hear you as well. So it looks like I do have a question with somebody who has their hand raised, so I'll go ahead.
Great, let's start there and then we'll come to Patty here in the room.
Sounds great. So Connie, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, Connie, and join the conversation?
Good morning, Connie.
Good morning. Hi. Good morning, everybody. Well, as you speak, Reverend Petra, I'm thinking about human self-awareness. And we have that. And therefore, it gives us a lot of insight and power, and I don't know what you'd call it, ability. And but I also notice other creatures have self-awareness as well. And one big one for me is I take a walk every day in the early morning in a park area near where I live, and people are out there walking their dogs. And I'm learning more and more and more about the dog's self-awareness. So, I get to talk to the people and have interchanges and things like that. And it's just amazing. So how would we differentiate human self-awareness from other animals or creatures' self-awareness?
It is. It's a great question, Connie. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. It's a great question. And so, awareness is somewhat another name for consciousness. And we can use those somewhat interchangeably. And so the notion, right, is that all of life is consciousness. And so consciousness is forever revealing itself. So the Hindus say it this way, which we in the science of mind have incorporated because it really makes so much sense. But the Hindu statement, loosely translated, is consciousness sleeps in the rocks, waves in the grass, moves in the animal, and awakens in the human being. We would say that there is consciousness or some level of awareness in all of creation, from the photon of light, the wave particle, all the way to the black hole and the largest galaxy that you can imagine, and everything in between. And so that consciousness is more and more and more able to recognize itself as there are organs designed and grown that have the ability to do that. So on planet Earth, we recognize that the most creative expression of life there is the human being. We engage with in the most ways of engaging with our environment, creating new things that haven't been there before. Now, this does not mean that there aren't some animals that do that. They are, but not in the same way. And so what we have to remember is that it's not what do I want to say? It's not like, okay, here are plants, over here are animals, over here are people, over there is whatever is beyond that, right? What it is, it's a continuum of consciousness. It's a continuum. And so there's even a place scientifically where there are single-celled animals that they can't quite tell whether they're a plant or an animal, right? Because it's a continuum. And so as consciousness, as organisms become more and more and more able to be conscious, there's more and more awareness. And yes, there are definitely places where self-awareness is revealing itself other than the human being. And it does appear as though there is a kind of self-awareness that a human being has that is not shared by any other animal in the same way, because there is no other animal that creates as much as we do. Good, bad, or indifferent, right? We're not always creating everything that's good, but that creates in all the ways that we do. And of course we have to think about, there's planets everywhere and maybe multiverses, and we're not saying that the human beings are the only place that self-awareness has revealed itself in an organism, but it's the one that we know the best. And quite frankly, since we're the human beings, it's the one we're most interested in. But it is a great question, and and this is why this idea of intelligent design is so important, because we actually do understand that animals and plants have awareness, they have consciousness, and they're as much a part of life as we are. And that would change everything in the way in which we relate to planet Earth if we really understood that and we lived by it. So it's a great question, Connie. Thank you. All right, Patty. We're happy to see you.
I work out of county the other week, and the one that I care for is about Baptist. So I go to Baptist church every other week. And I've been trying to interpret the lessons that they have into science of mind teachings. And it has come to me that the 12 stages that you're talking about are talked about several times in the Bible as the 12 tribes of Jerusalem, the 12 apostles. And it goes on from there to incorporate. Paul said it at the end of his teachings. The Baptist Church doesn't teach it chronologically. They teach it as it appears in the Bible. And at the end of Paul's teachings, he said, this is where we live and move and eternity. And it just blows my mind that the mystics of the Bible were trying to teach the same things in the vernacular that people understood.
Yes. Yes, and it's really extraordinary, right? Which is why, again, this is in the section of what the mystics knew. It's taught in the Vedas, it's taught in the Upanishads, right? Every spiritual tradition has worked to seek to answer these questions. And when one has a mystical experience of oneness and transcends the barriers of separation, it is extraordinary how similar the understanding is. And of course, yes, just like science of mind is in the vernacular of the 20s and 30s and 50s of the American sensibility, right? The biblical sensibility, the Hindu sensibility, right? It's all within a cultural context and using cultural language. And yet there is an extraordinary similarity between it, between all the ways in which the mystical understanding seeks to express what is creation all about, right? And Ernest Holmes picks up what Sri Aurobindo says in his book, The Life Divine, that the purpose of creation is for the delight of the divine. It's for the delight of the divine, which we pick up very strongly, that creation is beautiful. And yes, there are the cycles of birth and death and up and down and hot and cold and all of the expressions of the cycle, and yet there's still something so beautiful about it. And that we're now able to begin to be aware of the fact that we can contribute. And we're either contributing to the delight or we're contributing to the mess, right? Just sort of kind of exactly as we do in our own lives. Right? It's kind of exactly as we do in our own lives. Good. Thanks, Patty, and it's good. All right, so Ryan, let's come back to you. Do we have any other comments or questions out there?
Yeah, and I just want to acknowledge that some of the folks, it's a little hard of hearing, so just please speak up when you're in the room. I'm working on the sound as best as I can, but as we're unfolding organically into this new space, I also have to learn a lot about the audio in here as well, too. So just as much help as we could reiterate questions.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you. I'll try to reiterate the statements and questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So as it pertains to some questions that I've seen coming in here through the chat, it says, in the kingdom of God is within us, and when we live in that kingdom, then we are in the world, but not of the world. That's the biblical reference of Jesus, right? That being said, if there is nothing in the world to be released from, and if the world, this universe, is a beautiful place to experience the evolution of consciousness constantly expressing themselves, then this phrase, the one I just mentioned earlier, to be in the world and not of the world, on a whole different meaning, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I love that because up until now, right, what we've emphasized is the but not of the world. Like, isn't it great we're not of the world? And so we're going to get out of this at some point in some way, and we're not of the world. And let's really focus on that. But when we understand it, then being in the world takes on a whole new meaning. These are not opposed to it. These two ideas that we are in the world but not of it are no longer opposed to each other. It is a full statement. And it's unfortunate, I think, that the word but is in there. Because when we use the word but, the second half of the statement generally negates the first half of the statement. right? And it would have really been great if that statement had been written down as, we are in the world and not of it, right? We are in the world and not of it. That these are both true statements. Teilhard de Chardin was the one who coined the phrase, we are spiritual beings having a human experience, right? And that's the spiritual essence of who we are, is the individualized expression of the universal. That's the not of it part. But the human part of us, our whole physicality, the organ that has grown and evolved over time to be able to house a consciousness that is self-aware, right? That's the in the world part. And without the expression of in the world, then being is unexpressed, right? And it's something to really think about. If there is an infinite being, an infinite life, that is the infinite reality of the qualities of life itself, without creation, it's not fully all of itself, is it? Without creation, there's only being. There's only the possibility of love. There's only the potential for beauty. There's only the potential for joy, right? Because it's not expressed. The Hindus call it the pregnant void. The pregnant void, pregnant with all possibilities and potentials, but no thing yet. And so, by definition, that is not infinite. That's really only half of infinity. The other half of infinity is love expressed in all the possible ways that it can ever be expressed. Joy expressed in all the possible ways it can ever be expressed. Life unfolding in all the possible ways it can ever be unfolded. Do you see? Creation is required for infinity to actually be infinite. Otherwise, we just have being. And so the paradox of being and becoming becomes a wholeness. That's what we mean by it's all one. It's a wholeness. And being and becoming are equally as necessary. We are in the world and not of it. We are in the world and not of it. Both of those statements are equally true. And we have overly focused in most of our spirituality on the not of it part. Unless we're in the Indigenous Spiritualities and the Goddess Spiritualities. These are the spiritualities that tend to be the most grounded in the world part, right? Very much in the beauty and joy of nature itself and life. And as God has moved into heaven and moved off the planet through the evolution of spirituality, of human spirituality, then life and all of that not of it has become more and more primary. And what we want to do is marry the two. We want to marry the two. We want to recognize that they're both equally valuable, equally important. And we're here to express that. We're here to experience and express it. What an extraordinary idea that is. That's what we're up to. We're up to awakening to these truths and to imagine, what does that mean for our own lives? What does that mean for what I'm doing with my life and how I'm engaging with the world, the people around me, the planet, the things that my business is doing, how I'm raising my children, what car I'm driving, everything. Everything becomes a part of that. When I'm of the world, when I'm not of the world, then what I do here doesn't matter. Does it? Doesn't matter if I exploit the world, if I pollute, if I don't care about all of that because, well, I'm not of the world and my reward is someplace else. Where I'm really going is someplace else, right? Or we can be so embedded in this world that we don't recognize that there's actually something larger going on. And so in the science of mind, that's why we talk about involution and evolution, that there's the impulse and then there's creation. And we are a part of all of that. All right, Ryan, turning back to you.
Yes, thank you. So I'd like to go ahead and call Brenda into the room. Brenda, you want to go and unmute yourself and join the conversation?
Hi, Brenda.
Actually, it looked like Brenda. Hold on, there you go, Brenda.
Morning, Dr. Petra, Ryan, and community. Wow. I love this whole discussion of involution and evolution. And as I'm listening to this discussion of intelligent design, as an educated and schooled person, I found myself questioning what is the definition of intelligence. So I turned to the handy back little glossary in the book, and there is not one. And so I began consulting Google. And what I found, having been an educator, was how do we interact with intelligence? How do we identify it? And they listed 9 types that I think in your discussion reflect involution, evolution, as above, so below. So I just like to very rapidly list them. Spatial, the 3-dimensional relationship and visualization. Why is it our planets don't crash into each other, and why do we stay in orbit? The naturalist, we know that trees talk to each other and they reach out feeder roots to nourish each other. Musical, we know that caves and crystals vibrate together when they're stimulated and create harmonics. The logical, mathematical, our rational thought, everything we built and designed. The existential, the fact that we can even have this discussion here today to reflect upon these abstract thoughts. The interpersonal, how we get along, and not only us, but back to Connie's questions, we know that many of the animal kingdom, and we're now learning within the plant kingdom, interact with each other. Bodily kinesthetic, why is it a cat always lands on her feet most of the time? Linguistic, our ability to communicate with each other, and again, easily demonstrated beyond not only humans and higher primates, but animals and plants. And then the intrapersonal intelligence, the understanding of what makes you, you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Brenda. Right? All the ways in which we engage and we know things and we come to understand them and we begin to organize them into principles and laws and all of that are all the ways in which we express intelligence. Yeah, that's really great. Thank you for sharing that. And then we might also even think of, what does it mean to have a spiritual or mystical intelligence? To have an awareness of and an understanding of a larger reality, to have an experience of it and an ability to maybe provide some language and talk about it a little bit. And so, yeah, and I think that's what it means when an astrophysicist says, I look out into the universe and I see consciousness or intelligence looking back. And sometimes those two words are used interchangeably. Right? And the intelligence of the order and the lawfulness and the recognition that there is a way that it works that is understandable and makes sense, and that we can see it, and to recognize that that's true not only physically, but it's also true spiritually. As above, so below also means as below, so above. And so in metaphysics, a lot of what we do is we look for and we explore those, that order, that intelligence, that sense that there is an intelligence in every cell and every organ that knows what it's supposed to be doing, and a seed that seems to know how to grow into a plant. Right, and we look at all that, the ways in which that intelligence is expressed, and the laws that are revealed through all of that, and we use that we extrapolate from that. If that's true in the physical world, then that's also true in that intangible world we call the spiritual world, the world of possibilities and potential. That life that is not yet fully expressed. And so we extrapolate from the natural laws, we extrapolate these universal laws and principles in the same way as we seek to understand the universal laws and principles and then use them in the physical world. Good. All right. So we're coming to the end. We're going to finish up this section on evolution. And of course, it's interesting that the next section is cosmic consciousness. Right? It's so interesting that in this chapter on what the mystics knew, there is both something about the physical world, evolution, and something about cosmic consciousness. So we'll keep exploring how these two things relate to each other, how they're a part of what's going on. So I invite you to join us in 30 minutes for our Sunday celebration. If you're online, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and on our website. And I do want to say that this beautiful artwork is all these beautiful paintings are by George Holman. They are actually for sale, and Bill Holman, his brother, has made all these incredible pieces of sculpture. And so, yeah, those are available too. And anybody who gets one of those, Bill's going to donate all the proceeds to CSLDallas. They are gorgeous. So if you have an opportunity to come look at them, please do. They're really, really extraordinary. And I think next week, Bill and George are going to come and they're going to talk about all of George's work is all done on sacred geometry. Yeah, it's just extraordinary. Read the little things about it. All of Bill's work also has a sacred element to it, and you can see the statues all have an image that's being captured in this incredible, the work is just amazing. Or just look at it and enjoy it. Yeah, it's really beautiful. All right, so we'll see you at our celebration. We'll see you on Wednesday night, or we'll see you next week in our Science of Mind class. Bye for now.